Welcome, everybody, to our annual English department reading. Thank you for being here. I want to say right on to us for doing this and keeping it up. As we've said, it doesn't matter if we have a small or a large audience or it's just us. It's the act of doing it, right? I think it's like an act of faith for myself. I really do. Just like Mike Hillstrom putting together that recital. You know, it's an act of faith in the arts and being creative and keeping that fire alive. So I'm proud of us and glad to be here. And Merry Christmas. And now, okay, imagine yourselves listening to Tony Countryman. Actually, you don't even have to imagine because you are going to listen to our first reader, my neighbor in the college, journalism teacher, English teacher, and just all around good egg, Tony Countryman. All right, Tony, unmute yourself, and I'm going to mute myself. Wait, here we go.
I did that. Thank you so much, Ted, for that lovely introduction. And I totally agree with you because this was so tempting to just say, no, it's too much. It just, the act of creating when you're feeling like the world is crumbling is really difficult. And so, even I went back to old stuff, but I just said, no, I went new, and I'm like a new short story, although it will resemble a lot of mine. So I am going to actually call it on the screen because I think last time I read on paper, and it was like, why am I looking down? This way I will be looking out. So let me get it up here first. Okay. All right. This is called Finding Our Way. Uncle Eugene was my mother's brother, and they were very close. There are things I know about him from my memories and other things that were told to me. I think about those things sometimes, but there's no one still alive to ask any questions. Those of us left are all in the same boat as far as knowing his story. Yet I feel an inner current to visit it. I feel sometimes like I'm trying to reconstruct it like a puzzle. I know most of the pieces are made by me, but I feel the pull to make some sense of it all. One Christmas when I was 5, near the tree was a beautiful miniature kitchen, a wooden hutch, blue and white, with shelves and 2 small cupboards, and a table with blue legs and a linoleum top. He was a carpenter at heart, always good at building things, and he had made those for me. None of my siblings or cousins had gotten a gift like this. I played in that kitchen for hours at a time. Then later, my children played with them, and they sit in my basement still. They are in good shape even after more than 50 years and may someday find a place in another child's play world. Eugene was handsome, lanky, and lean, not like many of the men in the family. He was different, not that much younger than our parents, but it felt like he was somehow much cooler. He lived down the street, still in his parents' house since returning from the Korean War. His dark hair was slicked back with the shiny film common in those days, except for a gathering of short curls on top. When I hugged him, I smelt that hair elixir mixed with the lingering fragrance of cigarette smoke. He worked at a shipping warehouse, and he started to bring us huge empty cardboard boxes, 5 foot square and that tall. These were a child's paradise for play. What more could you ask for? Hold on to these. When we get enough, I'll build you guys a surprise, he told my brother, sister, and I. This was not easy. Those crates were perfect to transform into spaceships, classrooms, even churches as well as needed. But we tried, folding them carefully after each use and stacking them in the basement. Eugene wasn't alone. There was Lena. Lena had blonde hair, always pulled back in a French twist of a bun, neat and smooth, evoking Audrey Hepburn. She wore tailored suits and high heels and traveled with Coco, a miniature white poodle adorned with a rhinestone collar. It perched on her lap or beside regally, only yapping at us once in a while or even nipping if we dared approach. Just like everything about Uncle Eugene and Lena, Coco was an oddity to us. Our dogs were mutts who loped around the backyard and wrestled with us on the floor. Lena sat on Grandma's plastic protected couch, a cigarette held between her fingers edged by perfectly manicured blood red nails, and Coco sat beside her, glaring at us as if we were peasants. They were engaged, and Lena had a large diamond on her left hand that I supposed was the engagement ring. They were like the characters in the movies, all polished, smoking and drinking highballs. Our parents were miles out of style in comparison. The stack of cardboard boxes was growing in the basement. Almost every week, Uncle Eugene would stop by in his white work van and unload a few that we would add to the basement pile. My brother was getting impatient. "Let's make a train," Joe said one afternoon as we sat on the porch watching a heavy rain that kept us captive there. "We could just use a few of the boxes, cut them up, make a real train car or two." "But we promised Uncle Eugene," I said. "We have so many, he won't care. He probably won't even notice." The three of us headed into the basement. I let Joe and Carolyn go ahead and sat on a middle step in protest. "But he said he had a plan. He'd build us something." "Don't be such a pooper," Joe snapped. But he and Carolyn stood in front of the stack looking at it. There must have been 20 piled up. Joe took the top one, unfolded it, but we just looked at it. "Oh, forget it. This won't work." He tossed it aside, pushed past me, digging his knees into my shoulder. "It's stupid." Carolyn picked it up and carefully placed it back on the stack. My grandmother's house was small, only 2 bedrooms. Uncle Eugene's room had a bed, a desk, and a bookcase. The tall bookcase was full of hardcover tomes. My mom was always teasing him about all the reading he did, accusing him of boasting of his intellectual superiority. "It's a real library in there," she told us. "It's as good as the Chandler Park branch. When you're older, you'll be able to go over and borrow some." Although I couldn't read them yet, he would let me leaf through some books sometimes. I would lose myself in the neat rows of words, the crisp pages, and the smell. As enticing as a fresh loaf of bread to me even then, it was the budding bibliophilia. Sometimes I just like to sit at his desk chair, look at the shelves, and imagine what it would be like to know each one, to be able to understand every secret they held. Now I do have many shelves loaded with the heft and depth of hundreds of writers' works. And when you open some of them, on the first cover page is a sticker. It has a sketch featuring a medieval knight walking his horse with a passive, pensive gaze toward a flowering forest. Below are the printed words, "Ex Libris." Then added by typewriter strokes is Eugene J. Papernick. One Saturday morning, our Rice Krispies and Bugs Bunny were interrupted by Mom. "That was Uncle Eugene on the phone. He's coming over soon. He said you guys should be ready to work." It started by him having us clear a huge space in the basement. Then as we held the boxes upright, he would cut openings, at least 2 in each, one side or the other. It took a long time. He worked carefully. We set each box aside as he told us. There must have been 30 of them. When we were done, when we had done all, the basement felt full. Uncle Eugene started moving them, pushing them together, calling to Joe, then Carolyn and I to place the boxes as instructed. The center of the basement was soon a connected maze of them. Uncle Eugene went to the steps and called us to join him there so we could see the whole thing. "Good luck, kiddos. It's your maze now." "Wow, cool," Joe said. "Bet I can do it fastest." "You probably can," Eugene said. "Then you'll be able to change it, paint the boxes, make some signs. If you get lost, be careful." He laughed and went upstairs to see Mom. We stared in awe. It was an unbelievable, sprawling world, and it was ours. Joe was in first, but we were quick behind him. Carolyn didn't wait for me, though. I was not even sure what to do, but I followed, and they laughed and yelled, and so did I. And of course, I ended up in a corner, lost, not sure which direction was out. "Hey guys, help, somebody come get me," I called out. I heard some whispering and then silence. "Not funny, come on, help me out of here." Silence. I slumped down, grabbed my knees, tears starting to pool in my eyes. I called to them a few more times, now afraid that I was alone in the basement. I probably sat there only a few minutes, but it felt like hours before I got up and walked one way. It took me 4 or 5 tries until I came out back at the start. The 2 of them stood there, arms folded, then they burst into laughter. "This is great," Joe said as he ran back in. Carolyn took my hand this time. "Come on, I think we can beat him." We hosted years of maze tournaments. We became the place to be and garnered many a friend with our basement of boxes. One day, when Uncle Eugene was in Korea, Grandma and Grandpa got one of those telegrams. Mom told us how Grandma was hysterical. It said that Uncle Eugene was missing in action, likely a POW, and they would keep us updated on his status. As Grandma wailed, my mom went to find her father. Grandpa Tony had gone to Eugene's room. He lay on the bed so still that she was afraid he had died. But when she touched him, he looked at her, shook his head, and then turned to the wall. He did not leave that room much for months. He did not speak much either. He did not go to work. So eventually Grandma went to the Chrysler factory and took a job. They did not get updates. They all grieved. One day, an Army nurse at a hospital in Baltimore called. Eugene was in a bed there. He was weak and ill, but would be okay. He wanted them to know that he would be home someday soon. Eventually, a letter came with the same information, and slowly things got better. Mom said Grandpa Tony was never himself again, but when Eugene returned, they found ways to move on. I imagine him living in a crowded cell or held in a pen intended for animals. It's cold. The prisoners were not often or properly fed or clothed. They were taken on death marches of hundreds of miles, and they watched as their fellow prisoners fell and died from dehydration or starvation, and they must have envied that death sometimes. They would have been tortured, beaten, and confined alone in small boxes. Sorry, there go the dogs. After he came home, there were things that never healed. Now we would say he had PTSD, and there were also physical ailments that would never go away. I know now that he was scarred in many ways that the 7-year-old me could not understand. When I was called out of my second grade class, I was a little worried, but Joe and Carolyn were in the principal's office already. She told us to take our things and walk home together. She ignored Carolyn's questions and rushed us out. Wonder what's going on, Joe said as we headed across the playground to our street. But this is great. We had a math test this afternoon, so good for me. Dad met us about halfway, and seeing his face, we knew it was bad. He told us that Uncle Eugene had died, never woken up this morning. Father Chambers was at the grandma's house, and we were to go right there. I don't remember much about the next days, except looking at his waxy face formed into a stiff, slight smile, and I knew that was not how Uncle Eugene smiled. And I remember poor Lena in a black dress, tissues pressed to her eyes, and no Coco. I wondered where poor Coco had gone. Later, my mother said that some of the medicines he took had caused his death. Eventually, most of us realized that he must have overdosed. We'll never know if it was intentional. I kept the holy card that they handed out at his funeral. So I know he was 39 when he died, and I know his birthday, but the prayer on it, it's just one of those supposedly comforting Christian pleas for a reason. Don't grieve. He's in a better place. When I look at it today, the torn yellowing edges evoke other things. That life, his life, it's entwined with mine. I wrote this to see it more solidly. I did it to see that maze of cardboard boxes. I think of all the damn turns and twists, the fears and frustrations of it all. I think Eugene gave us a taste of life, and I hear his voice quite clearly. Good luck. It's your maze now. Thank you. Okay, I got through that one. Sorry about the dogs. I thought I was safe. They were downstairs and they came up.
I thought the dogs added to the mise-en-scene myself. So, that's well done, Tony. Nice reading too, by the way. Really, very cool. Now, prepare yourselves for, we have among us Odysseus in his RV, traveling with a oar to plant in the earth where the people do not know of the sea. I don't know where he has to go to eventually arrive there, but there he is, right? You know him, you love him, Gabriel DCO. You've come back to us.
Hello.
And read your stories. Take it away, Gabriel.
I had a couple mishaps trying to log on, but log on I did. Okay, let me open the folder where I put. Okay, so I have 4 pieces. I'm going to give you a little bit of index as to what I'm reading, and the first one is as a short poem. Since I got here, I've been, I don't know, discovering things about myself, remembering things, and so this is one of those things that I remember. And then I have another poem, and then a descriptive piece in prose, and end with a sonnet. So let's go for it. First one's called Il Mattarello di miei nonni. Um, Sunday morning in the warm kitchen, safe, the wafting smells of cooking sauce, the rhythms and swells of the rolling pin, il mattarello di mia nonna. The ritual of a Sunday meal, the ritual of the Sunday gathering of the brood, the early morning moves, the flour, the eggs, the fountain made of flour in the middle of the pasta board, the eggs in the funnel ready to take on the flour and to morph into the dough. All in the warmth and safety of my grandparents' kitchen, all movement and nurturing, all rhythm and love. And once Grandpa had kneaded the dough with expert pulls from the heel of his hands, over and over and over, the ball of dough was ready. The stretched dough sat on the kneading board, a huge wooden board that spread over the entire table, covered with a wet cloth, waiting to be transformed. The steam from the cooking sauce permeated the kitchen. The heat from the steam and the aroma of the sauce matched the safety of my kit. Sorry, the heat of the steam and the aroma of the sauce matched the safety of the kitchen and my grandparents' love. And then came the king, that long, thick, ebony black rolling pin, el palo de amasar, as we called it then, il mattarello, as I call it today, il mattarello di mia nonna, my grandmother's rolling pin. Grandfather's muscles, together with his baker skills, subdued that supple egg dough into a flat, pliable mass that would nurture us at noon that day. He heaved and moved, he pushed and pulled. The dough got thinner, the dough got longer, rounder, longer, thinner, longer, rounder. When Grandma took over, she stretched that dough into a thin film of flour and egg. It had reached its prime. It was ready. Time to let it rest. The sauce had now become irresistible, attracting my bits of bread to sample its hot vitality, only to be scolded by my grandmother for there would not be enough sauce if I kept sampling. And still, it was now time to cut the tagliarini, all the pasta rolled up into a long tube, Grandma leaning over it with a surveyor's eye, her knife, the sharp scalpel of a surgeon, ready to make our pasta out of hair thin strips of dough. Grandma cutting, Grandpa watching, I, a child, enjoying their company and preparations, unknowingly feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling warm, in the house where I was born, in the company of those who loved me, those whose love made my childhood livable, my youth, my strength, my life, their memory. Today, my grandparents' rolling pin, il mattarello di miei nonni, is with me. It is still long, thick, unebbly black. Its thin cracks are witness to the passing of time where loved ones die, and yet love lives in us forever. Where we become those loved ones, as I use il mattarello di miei nonni. All right. Sorry, I stumbled because as I was reading, I put the whole thing on screen and I'm wondering